It started as an ordinary trip. Or at least that's what she thought. A late-night emergency call, a rushed goodbye, a bag hurriedly packed by the man she trusted most. But somewhere on that dark highway, something felt wrong. The car vibrated strangely. Her chest tightened. And when she finally stopped to check her purse, she froze. Inside was a cold, unfamiliar device silent. Until it suddenly began to blink, panic rising, breath shaking, instinct screaming run. Instead, she drove straight to the police station, desperate for answers. But what happened next was worse than anything she imagined. Officers backed away. Radios lit up, a detective's face drained of color. And then, the room erupted in fear, because that mysterious object wasn't random. It wasn't harmless, and it definitely wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of a nightmare. And a betrayal so shocking it shattered everything she believed about love, loyalty, and marriage. It was one of those nights that feel almost unreal in their calmness, the kind where silence isn't empty, it's comforting. The house was wrapped in darkness, the world outside asleep, and the ticking clock was the only thing brave enough to disturb the quiet. She was lost in a deep, restful sleep, the kind you only get when your mind believes life is safe and predictable. But safe is such a fragile illusion. At exactly 3 a.m, the universe shattered. The landline phone exploded into a piercing ring that sliced through the silence like a scream in an empty room. She lurched awake, heart pounding, mind foggy and disoriented, reaching blindly through the darkness. Who calls at 3 a.m? Nobody brings good news at 3 a.m. Her hand trembled as she lifted the receiver, voice barely stable as she whispered a greeting. On the other end was a man she vaguely recognized, a neighbor, frantic and breathless, words tumbling out so fast they barely sounded human. He said he was calling from her mother's town. And then came the sentence that ripped the ground from beneath her feet. Her mother was critically ill, unconscious. Losing time fast. The world slowed. Her chest tightened. Tears burned instantly in her eyes as fear flooded every vein in her body. The calm, strong, comforting woman who raised her safe place in the world was suddenly slipping toward the edge of life. Panic took over. Her breathing turned short and sharp. This wasn't a moment where you think. This was a moment where instinct grabs the wheel and drags you forward. She dropped the phone. It clattered against the table as if even the house itself felt the shock. She turned to the other side of the bed and shook her husband desperately, voice broken, pleading, begging for support, for comfort, for partnership. Any woman in her position would expect their partner to jump into action, but instead, she was met with hesitation. Excuses wrapped in calmness. Logical reasoning cutting through raw emotion. He reminded her of his important day, his major meeting, his future on the line. He held her shoulders gently like a man pretending to console, not a man preparing to protect. There was something chilling about how composed he was while she was breaking apart right in front of him. But she was loving, she was trusting. She was the kind of woman who always tried to understand, even when she shouldn't, so she swallowed the heartbreak and nodded. Fine, she would drive alone. She would handle it alone. Because what choice did she have? Downstairs, the house moved differently. He packed her bag thoughtfully, carefully, almost suspiciously careful, a bottle of water, some snacks, a jacket. He warmed up the car. He hugged her with the kind of affection that now, looking back, feels rehearsed. He kissed her forehead, told her to be careful, and stood on the porch watching her leave like a man sending his wife to safety. She drove into the darkness, heart racing with fear for her mother, completely unaware that danger wasn't waiting on the road ahead. It was already sitting beside her. And as the car disappeared into the night, he remained standing still, not grieving, not worried, but silently satisfied. Because for him this wasn't a night of fear or worry. This was the beginning of something he had planned for far too long. And she had just stepped straight into it. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of her, a long ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the night. Streetlights flickered past in a steady rhythm, each one flashing against the windshield like a heartbeat she couldn't control. Outside the windows, the world disappeared into blackness, no comforting city glow, no familiar scenery, just emptiness. Inside the car, her thoughts spun wildly. One second she imagined her mother lying helpless, fighting for breath, fighting for life. The next, she questioned everything. Why did the emergency have to strike tonight? Why did it feel like the timing was designed to break her? She tried to push fear aside and focus on the road, gripping the steering wheel tighter with every mile, as if she could physically hold on to hope. But the farther she drove, the heavier everything began to feel, not just emotionally, physically. The car didn't feel right. It wasn't obvious at first. Just a faint vibration humming beneath the seat. A strange drag in the way the vehicle moved, like something unseen was holding it back. She frowned, checking the dashboard, but everything seemed normal. Maybe it was the road. Maybe fatigue, maybe nerves. That's what she told herself, because the alternative, believing something was wrong when she was completely alone in the middle of nowhere, was too terrifying to accept. So she kept going, pushing forward, because that's what good daughters do. They don't panic, they don't stop. They just drive. But her instincts were louder than her logic. The more miles she covered, the more unsettled she became. Her chest never loosened, her breathing never steadied. Then the car delivered its next warning. The fuel light blinked on. Impossible, the tank shouldn't have been anywhere near empty. Her husband had filled it recently. At least that's what he said. A chill crawled down her arms. Something wasn't right. Something was deeply, dangerously wrong, but she didn't yet understand why. She tried to reason with herself. Fuel gauges malfunction, right? But fear is powerful. Fear listens to the things logic tries to bury. As the warning light pulsed orange, her mind started racing faster than the car itself. Should she risk pushing forward? What if she ran out of gas on a deserted stretch of highway with no one around to help? She spotted a sign for a small rest stop ahead, a lonely, quiet gas station sitting beneath harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by darkness. Relief mixed with dread. She pulled in, parked, and for the first time since the journey began, the world stopped moving. She leaned back in the seat, breath shaky, trying to gather herself. Just a quick stop, she thought. Fuel, restroom, back on the road, back to her mother. Simple, routine, safe. She reached into the bag her husband had packed, expecting nothing more than her wallet. But inside that simple act, inside that ordinary moment, her entire world was about to fracture. Because waiting at the bottom of that bag wasn't comfort. It wasn't reassurance. It wasn't anything normal at all. It was the nightmare she didn't know she'd been driving with Dot, and once she touched it, there would be no going back. Her fingers brushed against it before she even saw it. Something cold, something rigid. Something that absolutely did not belong in her purse. For a moment, she froze, hands suspended in the bag as if touching it had shocked her system. Slowly, cautiously, she pushed aside the jacket, the tissues, the neatly packed snacks, and there it was. A black metal box. Heavy, unbranded, industrial. Nothing about it looked familiar or remotely harmless. It didn't look like an accessory or a gadget or anything that should have casually been slipped into a wife's travel bag. A small light pulsed dimly on one side, as if the thing itself was breathing. Her lungs tightened. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. For a second, her brain refused to believe what her eyes were seeing. She tried to convince herself it had to be something innocent. Maybe something work-related her husband forgot to remove. Maybe some kind of power pack. A tool. Anything other than what instinct whispered it really was, but instinct rarely lies, and hers was screaming. She held it carefully, turning it in trembling hands, half expecting it to burn her. The more she examined it, the less sense it made. No labels, no company mark. Just sharp edges, sealed panels, and a tiny switch on the side one she wished she had never noticed. Fear does strange things to the mind. It can make you reckless. It can make you desperate. And sometimes, it makes you push a button simply because shock tricks you into believing control is possible. She flicked it. Not out of bravery, but out of a panicked need to stop whatever it was from doing. Whatever it was already doing. That single movement changed everything. The gentle pulse of light transformed instantly into a faster, more deliberate flash. The slow, ominous glow turned to yellow. And then came the sound, dot beep, dot beep, dot beep. Not loud, not theatrical. Just steady, cold, merciless. The kind of sound that feels like it's counting down not just seconds, but your life. Every nightmare she had ever seen in a movie suddenly became terrifyingly real. Her throat went dry. Her entire body felt numb. The world outside the car kept moving normally. The attendant finished filling the tank. A distant truck rumbled by, but inside that vehicle, time stopped. She wasn't just afraid anymore, she was trapped inside a moment where every instinct screamed the same message. This is death. This is real. This is happening. She placed it down slowly, as if sudden motion might provoke it. Her hands shook so violently she could barely breathe. Her mind raced, thoughts crashing over each other. Who put this here? Why was it hidden? Why was it active? And why was her husband the one person who touched that bag before she left? The calmest person in the world while she was falling apart. Suspicion clawed at the edges of her heart, but she shoved it away. She couldn't handle betrayal right now. She could barely handle breathing. One thing was certain, this wasn't something she could ignore. This wasn't something you shrug off and keep driving. This wasn't something an ordinary mechanic or a random passerby could handle. This needed experts, professionals, people trained to look death in the eye. So she made the only decision that made sense in the middle of madness. She turned the key. She pulled away from the gas station. Not toward the highway, not toward her mother, but toward the only place she believed might save her. The nearest police station, where she prayed someone would tell her this was all a mistake. But instead, she was about to walk into pure panic. The police station felt like a sanctuary when she first pulled into the parking lot. Bright lights, solid walls, uniforms, authority, safety. For the first time since she found the device, she allowed herself to believe she wasn't alone anymore. She parked far from the entrance, the way you instinctively do when your brain whispers, "What if this thing explodes?" Then she stepped out of the car, clutching the black box in trembling hands. The night air bit cold against her skin, but sweat rolled down her spine. She crossed the distance to the glass doors as fast as her legs could carry her, heartbeat roaring in her ears. Inside, the lobby was quiet. A sleepy young officer looked up, expecting something routine: a lost wallet, maybe paperwork, maybe a complaint. What he got instead was a woman with wide, terrified eyes, setting a blinking device on the counter like she was placing death itself in front of him. He leaned forward out of habit, then froze. That tiny hesitation, those 2 seconds where the officer's eyes narrowed in confusion, felt like forever. Then something clicked. Recognition, training, fear. His expression changed instantly. He jerked back as if the counter had burst into flames. "Ma'am, don't touch it." His voice cracked through the quiet night like an alarm bell. Chairs scraped backward. Radios lifted to mouths. Footsteps thundered. The calm, sleepy station transformed into a battlefield of urgency. Before she even understood what was happening, multiple officers were shouting commands, clearing the area, pushing people back. One of them approached cautiously, like someone facing a predator that could strike at any second. She stood there shaking, tears running silently, feeling like suddenly she was the danger. The room that should have comforted her now felt colder than a night outside. And when the detective stepped out, the one man whose reaction mattered most, everything changed again. He didn't panic at first. That was almost worse than panic. He studied the blinking box with a trained, haunted calm. His shoulders stiffened, his jaw tightened. He didn't yell, he didn't curse. He simply gave urgent orders with a steady authority that made everyone move twice as fast. That kind of reaction never means good news. When he turned to her, his eyes weren't angry. They were deeply concerned in a way that said, "You don't understand how close you came." He guided her to a safer distance, voice controlled, trying to keep her breathing steady while his words shattered her world piece by terrifying piece. The object wasn't random. It wasn't harmless. It wasn't something someone forgot. It was a detonator, not a bomb itself, but a trigger. A remote brain designed to control a much larger explosion hidden elsewhere. And it wasn't just a simple signal sender, it was smart. It was built to activate based on speed, meaning the faster she drove, the closer she came to death. That's when reality truly hit her. If she had stayed on that interstate, if she had pushed the car, desperate to reach her mother, if she had driven like any panicked daughter would, she might not have survived the trip at all. The detective explained it gently but honestly. She was standing in that station by nothing short of a miracle. Something fate, instinct, divine intervention had made her stop. Her knees buckled. The room blurred. The world tilted under her feet, and she felt as if gravity itself was slipping. The truth wasn't just frightening, it was soul-crushing. Because this wasn't an unlucky coincidence. This wasn't some random criminal targeting a stranger. This was deliberate. This was planned. This was personal. And slowly, painfully, her heart began forming the question she didn't want answered. Who would want her dead? And why did the image of her husband suddenly feel like the most terrifying thought of all? They led her to a bench away from the reception area, somewhere safer, somewhere quieter, somewhere easier to soften the blow of the truth they were about to deliver. The detective sat across from her, not as a cold officer, but as someone who has seen too many lives destroyed by the darkest parts of humanity. He spoke carefully, every word chosen, every sentence measured. The device in her purse wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't mischief. It wasn't an abandoned experiment. It was professional. Designed with precision. Calibrated not just to exist, but to kill. The blinking signal wasn't random, it was waiting. Waiting for speed. Waiting for a car traveling fast. Waiting for someone exactly like her. A distressed woman rushing through the night, desperate to reach a supposedly dying mother. The realization carved through her like a knife. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't fate. This was engineered, planned, crafted. Someone wanted her gone. Her breathing grew shallow, as if invisible hands were tightening around her chest. The detective asked the question he already suspected the answer to. Who had access to your car? Who touched your bag before you left? The thought alone felt like betrayal burning in her throat. Only one name existed. Only one person had been with her. Only one person had packed that bag so lovingly. Only one person had told her to hurry. Only one person who didn't come with her. Her husband, the man she trusted. The man she had built a life with, the man she shared a bed with. The moment his name left her lips, something inside her seemed to break. A woman should never have to say her husband's name in the same breath as a murder investigation. It didn't feel real. It didn't even feel possible. Yet reality rarely cares about what we're emotionally ready to accept. The detective didn't judge her. He didn't accuse recklessly. Instead, his team worked. They checked her car. They searched it carefully, each second crawling by like an eternity. And when one of the bomb technicians signaled, the entire world felt like it stopped breathing. Hidden beneath the driver's seat, placed with deliberate care, was what they feared most. Not a movie prop, not a bluff, real explosive. Enough to obliterate her car, enough to erase her, enough to ensure she would never make it to her destination, alive. The detonator in her bag? It was paired with this device. The blinking light? The countdown to ensuring tragedy, and her speeding on the highway earlier. That had been the final ingredient the killer needed. She didn't just escape death. She escaped execution. Her tears didn't fall quietly anymore. They came in violent waves. Not just from fear. Fear would have been easier. This was from heartbreak. From betrayal so deep it felt like her soul was being ripped apart. The detective delivered the final blow gently but directly. Whoever orchestrated this didn't just want her dead. They wanted it to look like an accident, a tragic highway explosion, a grieving husband, insurance payouts, A solved narrative that would bury her story beneath a headline for a day and then disappear. That wasn't a stranger's plan. That wasn't fate's cruelty. That was someone who knew her life, her habits, her emotions, her love, and weaponized all of it against her. And for the first time, she whispered the unthinkable out loud. What kind of man plans his wife's death and sleeps peacefully while she drives toward it? It didn't take long for the investigation to stop being about what happened and begin focusing on who did it. The detectives' team moved fast, combing through records, tracing calls, checking camera footage, and pulling every digital thread they could find. This wasn't random crime. They needed motive, purpose, reason, and unfortunately real life rarely hides its ugliness neatly. As information poured in, a picture began forming. Financial records surfaced, secret debts, failed investments. Quiet desperation hidden behind expensive smiles and confident conversations. Her husband wasn't just struggling, he was drowning. And when desperate men get cornered, they don't always look for help. Sometimes they look for sacrifice. When the detective slid the documents across the table toward her, it felt like watching her life being translated into pure betrayal. But the money wasn't the only monster in the shadows. Insurance records came next. Freshly signed policies, shockingly high payouts. And every clause seemed perfectly aligned to one outcome. Her death in an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't bad timing. It was strategic, cold, methodical. He hadn't panicked and made a reckless decision in a moment of weakness. He planned. He calculated. He prepared. He chose this path carefully. And the part that ripped her apart wasn't just realizing he had plotted to kill her. It was realizing that while she was praying for his success, he was planning for her funeral. While she was loving him openly, he was quietly replacing her life with numbers on a page. She pressed a hand to her chest because it literally hurt to breathe. Heartbreak isn't always poetic, it's physical, heavy, crushing. Then came the final twist of the knife. There was someone else, another woman. Someone who stood by him not in sorrow, but in conspiracy. Someone who laughed with him, planned with him, dreamed with him while building those dreams on her grave. The text messages were undeniable, intimate, excited, celebratory. Two people talking, not about love or meaning, but about money that would come after a tragic loss. Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. Every message was a betrayal of the vows she once believed were sacred. The detective didn't sensationalize it. He didn't dramatize the truth. He simply laid out the facts, because they were already devastating enough. Her life had become currency to them, and worse. They expected to win. Somewhere between tears and numbness, something inside her shifted. The fear that once controlled her body began to fade, not because the situation was less terrifying, but because something stronger was beginning to grow in its place. Anger, strength, resolve. The detective asked her the question that would decide everything. Did she want to help bring him down completely? Did she want justice so undeniable that he couldn't lie his way out of it? She didn't even hesitate. Her crying stopped. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes hardened. She wasn't his victim anymore. She wasn't a frightened wife in the shadows of his decisions. She was going to be the end of his plan. If he thought she was weak, if he thought she would disappear quietly, he was about to learn just how wrong he'd been. The decision was made in silence, no dramatic speeches, no heroic music, just a woman who had already died once tonight, deciding she would not die again. Instead, she would become the very thing her husband never expected, his reckoning. The detective laid out the plan slowly, carefully, making sure she truly understood the weight of what she was agreeing to. They couldn't just arrest him yet. Legally, emotionally, strategically. Timing mattered. They needed him confident. They needed him careless. They needed him certain that his plan had worked so perfectly that Gil couldn't convince him he'd failed. So they proposed something bold, something dangerous, something that required her to erase herself from her own life, a staged death, a fake tragedy, a perfectly constructed lie to trap the man who had built his life on deception. It wasn't easy, Not emotionally, not mentally, not humanly. Because pretending to die means letting the world believe you're gone. It means letting your mother think she lost her daughter. It means letting people cry over you while you're still breathing. She sat there listening as the detective explained how they'd transport her to a secure location, how bomb experts would safely control the explosion, how evidence would be found, how news would travel. It would be controlled chaos, a performance designed to fool everyone, especially him. At first, her body trembled, not from fear of the plan, but from something deeper, grief. Grief for a marriage that truly died tonight. Grief for trust she'd never get back. Grief for the woman she used to be before betrayal tore her apart. But as the plan unfolded, something else began to rise inside her. Power. For the first time since this nightmare began, she wasn't reacting to danger, she was shaping the outcome. She wasn't the hunted anymore. She was the hunter. She pictured him smiling somewhere, confident, believing she was driving toward her death while his future opened wide. She pictured him waking up the next morning, expecting to play the grieving hero while collecting insurance money soaked in lies. And that image didn't break her anymore, it fueled her. The officers fitted her with protective gear, guided her through every step, and treated her not as a victim, but as a vital part of justice. Soon, the car would burn. The story would spread. The world would believe she was gone, and he would smile. Thinking he'd won, she watched from safety as the explosion lit up the night sky. Flames roared, swallowing the car that had once symbolized love and security, now transformed into ash and evidence. The sound shook the ground, rattled the air, and somewhere deep inside her, shattered the last remaining pieces of innocence she'd ever have about love. This wasn't just the destruction of a vehicle. It was the funeral of who she used to be. As fire consumed metal, something else ignited inside her unyielding resolve. He would mourn publicly, celebrate privately, and walk right into the trap he created himself. And when the moment came, when truth finally stood face to face with him, he wouldn't be looking at a weak wife. He would be staring at the woman who refused to die for his greed and was now ready to end his lies forever. News travels fast, especially tragedy. By morning, headlines whispered of a fiery highway accident. A car engulfed in flames, a woman presumed dead. To the world, it was heartbreaking. To him, it was victory wrapped in sorrow. He played his role flawlessly, trembling voice, red eyes. Dramatic collapse at the first sight of televised wreckage. He screamed her name in public, performed grief for strangers, clutched his chest like a man shattered by heartbreak. People touched his shoulder, hugged him, told him how sorry they were. Cameras captured him as the devastated husband. He shook. He wept. He looked every bit the broken widower fate had unfairly punished. And yet behind that carefully manufactured misery, another feeling lived quietly in his chest. Relief, satisfaction, triumph. His plan, his perfect, calculated plan had worked. Or so he thought. Behind closed doors, the mask dropped. No tears, no shaking. Just a man walking through silence with a smile only greed can create. His house felt bigger now, freer. He sat down at the table, staring at documents that no grieving husband should be calmly reviewing. Insurance forms, property titles, financial projections of a life without her. He wasn't mourning. He was planning his new beginning. The woman he claimed to love was now nothing more than a payout number and a problem successfully solved. But fate has a twisted sense of timing. Because just when he thought the universe had finally rewarded him, small cracks began appearing in the perfect picture he built. Strange feelings crept in. Subtle unease. The feeling of a presence when he was alone. The sense of being watched in his own home. It began with sound. A faint melody drifting through the house, familiar, emotional, her favorite music. The same songs she used to play while cooking, songs he hated. Songs that had no business echoing through the empty home of a widow. He froze, heart pounding, staring toward the back of the house. The music grew louder, clearer, it sounded impossible. Because that speaker had been unplugged, boxed, forgotten. He stormed toward it in anger masked as bravery, slamming it off, breaking it, destroying the noise he couldn't emotionally face. This wasn't grief. This wasn't guilt. This was fear. And fear has a way of whispering the truth, even when you try to bury it. Because if music isn't turning itself on, then someone is turning it on. But who? Then came the final blow, the one moment where fear stopped being a feeling and became reality. Alone in his bedroom, he collapsed into bed ready to rest in the comfort of victory, but instead of softness, his head struck something hard beneath the pillow. He reached under it and pulled out the one object that should have been erased from existence, the detonator. The same device meant to control her death. The same piece of technology that should have burned to ash in that explosion. Sitting inches from his face, waiting for him. A sticky note attached. Handwriting he knew like heartbeat. Calm, familiar, cold. A message that cut through his soul. You forgot to deactivate it. His heart stopped. His breath vanished. His world shattered. Because in that instant, one truth thundered louder than panic. If the detonator is here, then she isn't gone. And the ghost he feared wasn't supernatural. It was justice walking back toward him, alive, watching, closing in. From that moment on, sanity became something fragile. Something he could no longer hold on to. Sleep refused to come. When his eyes closed, he didn't see darkness, he saw flames. Saw the accident. Saw her face staring back through ash and smoke like a haunting truth that refused to die. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow looked like a silhouette. Every creak in the hallway made his chest tighten as if the house itself knew his secret. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe he imagined the detonator. Maybe someone was playing some twisted prank. Maybe guilt had finally cracked him open. But deep down, beneath every excuse, the truth pulsed like a heartbeat. Someone knew. Someone was inside his life. Someone wasn't letting him celebrate murder comfortably. For the first time since this began, he felt small, powerless, hunted. Paranoia followed him everywhere. Mirrors became enemies. Hallways became tunnels of dread. He jumped at his own reflection. He paced the house with a frenzy that bordered on madness. He ripped apart closets, searched beneath beds, checked doors 3, 4, 5 times, convinced someone was hiding in his walls. He snapped at shadows, shouted at empty rooms, begged nothingness to leave him alone. But justice isn't something you can scream away. Every reminder of her perfume lingering in the air, a scarf appearing where he swore he hadn't left it, whispers of familiar movement, felt like a hand tightening around his throat. Logic slipped further away with every hour. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't grief. This was the consequences of cruelty finally coming to collect. Desperation drove him to places he swore he'd never reach. He couldn't sit still. He couldn't think. The image of the detonator on his pillow tortured him. He replayed everything in his head, every step of the plan, every detail he believed he'd perfected. It should have worked. It should have ended her. It should have given him money, freedom, a new life. Instead, it was shredding him piece by piece. He looked at the photos of the explosion, clinging desperately to prove she was gone. But now even evidence felt like a lie. If the device survived, if the signals were wrong, if something interfered, then maybe the explosion wasn't what he thought it was. Maybe she wasn't where he believed she ended. The human brain can rationalize evil, but it cannot rationalize being outsmarted by the person you try to destroy. And beneath all that spiraling fear, another nightmare was quietly unfolding. The world around him was starting to notice. Friends whispered. The insurance company asked too many questions. Detectives watched him a little too closely. He could feel suspicion tightening around him like invisible chains. This wasn't control anymore. This wasn't clever anymore. This was collapse. The confident man who once calculated life like a business deal was now a jittering shell of himself, consumed by dread he couldn't escape. He didn't know it yet. But the final act of this twisted story was already moving toward him. And soon, there would be nowhere left to run, no lies strong enough to hide behind. No mask convincing enough to save him, because the woman he tried to silence forever wasn't just alive. She was coming, and justice was already at the door. His final downfall didn't arrive with chaos. It arrived with precision. The same precision he once believed made him untouchable. The day he truly believed he had won, the day he walked into the insurance headquarters to collect what he thought was his reward, that was the day everything ended. He walked in dressed like success, confident smile perfectly placed, morning but strong expression rehearsed to perfection, papers signed. Voices sympathetic, money just moments away. Then the lights dimmed. A screen lit up. And instead of corporate presentations, instead of condolences, instead of legality, there was truth, footage, evidence, his garage, his hands, his device, his crime. Every hidden camera angle, every movement, every lie turned into undeniable proof. The room didn't breathe, the world didn't move. His pride collapsed into raw terror. The performance was over. The audience finally knew the script. He tried to speak, tried to lie, tried to twist reality like he always had. But fear had stolen his voice. Desperation flooded his veins. And then, the final crack shattered what little sanity he still held. The doors opened. Footsteps echoed. He turned. And saw the one thing he could never have prepared for, not the police. Not the executives thought her dot alive, real, standing, breathing, not a memory, not a ghost, not a casualty of his greed, but a woman reborn from betrayal and fire. His body collapsed backward as if gravity itself rejected him. He shook. He screamed. He begged something, God, fate, anyone, to explain how she existed in front of him, but she didn't yell. She didn't break. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him with a strength he never expected. Because the woman he tried to erase was now the full author of his ending. Detective stepped in. Handcuffs clicked into place. His future evaporated the second metal wrapped around his wrists. He didn't look powerful anymore. He didn't look clever. He didn't look like a mastermind. He looked small, pitiful. A man stripped of the lies he once believed made him invincible. As he was dragged away, he looked back at her desperately, maybe hoping for mercy. Maybe hoping for the softer woman he once manipulated to still exist. But she wasn't there anymore. Betrayal destroyed her. Survival rebuilt her dot, and as the doors closed behind him, one truth remained shining clearly in that quiet room. She didn't just survive death. She looked it in the eye and refused to bow. She proved that sometimes strength isn't born from power. It's born from being forced to rise when the world tries to bury you. She walked out not as a victim of tragedy, but as a living reminder that intuition saves lives, courage exposes evil, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is refuse to let someone else decide when their story ends.